There's something ironic about a therapist needing therapy. Trust me, I'm aware of the cliché. But 3 months after my divorce was finalized, sitting alone in my Victorian house at 2 a.m, with a bottle of sleeping pills that weren't working anymore, the irony didn't feel clever. It felt suffocating. That's when I started looking at wellness retreats. Not the cheap ones, not the weekend yoga getaways or the spa packages. The expensive ones, the exclusive ones, the ones that promise transformation, not just relaxation. The ones that cost more than my monthly mortgage and made guarantees that would make any rational psychologist laugh. I found Serenity Summit on a Tuesday night, 10 days in the Berkshires, led by Dr. Vivian Cross, a former psychiatrist turned wellness guru, limited to 10 women, no phones, no contact with the outside world, total immersion into whatever healing process she'd developed. The price was $10,000. I paid it the next morning using money from my divorce settlement. As a psychologist, I should have seen the red flags. But here's what they don't tell you in graduate school. When you're drowning, even a mirage looks like salvation. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old. I specialize in trauma therapy. And this is the story of how I almost became a victim of the most sophisticated psychological manipulation I've ever encountered. It started 6 weeks before the retreat. I was not doing well. That's the clinical way to put it. The honest way, I was falling apart. My practice was fine. I showed up every day, sat in my chair, listened to my patients' problems, offered insight and coping strategies. I was good at my job. That was the problem. I could fix everyone else. I just couldn't fix myself. My marriage had ended after 7 years. Not dramatically. No affair, no betrayal. Just 2 people who woke up one day and realized they'd become strangers living in the same house. The divorce was amicable. We split everything fairly. He took the dog. I took the cat. He got the condo in Boston. I kept the Victorian in Millbrook. Everyone said I was handling it well. I wasn't. I stopped sleeping. Not completely. But those deep, restful hours of actual sleep, gone. I'd lie awake replaying conversations, analyzing where things went wrong, wondering if I could have prevented it. The sleeping pills helped for about 2 weeks. Then my body adapted. The dosage that used to knock me out for 8 hours barely gave me 4. I thought about increasing the dose. I thought about it a lot. Too much. That scared me. So I looked for alternatives. Meditation apps, exercise routines, herbal supplements. Nothing worked. Nothing quieted my mind long enough to let me rest. That's when I started researching retreats. I told myself I was being proactive, seeking help before things got worse. But really, I was desperate. I needed someone to tell me I could be okay again. That this feeling of being fractured into 1,000 pieces wasn't permanent. Serenity Summit's website was beautiful. Minimalist design, soft colors, testimonials that sounded almost too good to be true. Women talking about being reborn, about finding themselves, about leaving behind their pain and stepping into their power. One testimonial stuck with me. A woman named Catherine wrote, "I came broken. I left whole. Dr. Cross didn't just heal me. She taught me how to heal myself. I wanted that. God, I wanted that so badly." There was a phone number. I called it on a Thursday afternoon between patients. The receptionist had a calm, soothing voice. She asked me basic questions. My name, my age, why I was interested in the retreat. I gave her the sanitized version. Recent divorce, struggling with sleep, looking for tools to manage stress. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked a question that should have stopped me cold. "How much would you pay to become yourself again?" I remember laughing. A short, bitter sound. "I don't know. What's the going rate for that?" "For some people it's priceless," she said. "For others it's exactly $10,000 and 10 days of commitment." I booked a spot that same call. Looking back, that question should have been my first warning. But desperation makes you reckless, and I was desperate. The retreat started on a Monday in early October. I drove 3 hours from Millbrook to the Berkshires, following GPS directions that took me deeper and deeper into wooded areas until I thought I must have made a wrong turn somewhere. Then I saw the gates. Wrought iron, elegant. They opened automatically as my car approached. The estate was stunning. A sprawling stone mansion surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens, an infinity pool that seemed to blend into the forest beyond. Everything designed with that same minimalist aesthetic from the website. Calming, luxurious, expensive. I parked next to 8 other cars, all of them newer models, BMWs, Mercedes, one Tesla. I drove a 5-year-old Honda. I suddenly felt out of place. A woman in white linen greeted me at the entrance. She smiled warmly and introduced herself as Maya, one of the retreat facilitators. She took my bags and my car keys, told me I wouldn't need them for the next 10 days. Then she asked for my phone. I hesitated. I'd known this was part of the deal. Total disconnection from the outside world. But actually handing over my phone felt different. It felt like cutting a lifeline. It's for your benefit, Maya said gently. You can't truly disconnect if you're still connected. I gave her the phone. Well, I gave her my regular phone. The one I'd smuggled in, hidden in a box of tampons at the bottom of my suitcase. That one stayed with me. Call it professional paranoia. Call it trust issues. But something about completely cutting off all communication made me uncomfortable. Maya led me through the mansion to my room. High ceilings. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest. A bed so plush it looked like sleeping on a cloud. Fresh flowers on the nightstand. Everything white and cream and peaceful. Dinner is at 6, Maya said. Casual dress. You'll meet Dr. Cross and the other women then. She left me alone. I unpacked, hung up my clothes, hid my backup phone behind a heating vent in the bathroom. Then I sat on the bed and tried to breathe through the anxiety creeping up my chest. What was I doing here? I was a trained psychologist. I knew how group therapy worked. I knew the techniques for building trust and creating breakthroughs. I shouldn't need this. I should be able to heal myself. But I couldn't. That was the truth. I couldn't. At 6 o'clock, I made my way downstairs to the dining room. 9 other women were already there. They ranged in age from late 20s to mid-50s. All of them well-dressed. All of them carrying the same careful composure I recognized from my own mirror. The look of women who were holding themselves together by sheer force of will. And then there was Dr. Vivian Cross. She stood at the head of the table, and I understood immediately why people followed her. She was in her mid-40s, beautiful in that ageless way that money and good genes create. Dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. Minimal makeup, dressed in cream linen, that somehow looked both casual and elegant. But it was her voice that got you. Warm, calm, the kind of voice that made you feel safe, like you could tell her anything and she wouldn't judge, wouldn't flinch, would just understand. "Welcome," she said, smiling at me. "You must be Emily. We're so glad you're here. Please sit." I sat between a woman who introduced herself as Patricia and another who said her name was Jade. Patricia looked to be in her early 50s. Jade was closer to my age. Vivian explained how the retreat would work. Mornings would start with yoga and meditation, breakfast together, then group therapy sessions. Afternoons were for individual reflection and optional activities. Evenings included dinner and more group work. The most important rule, Vivian said, is honesty. Complete honesty. Not just with me or with each other, but with yourselves. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. Everyone nodded. I nodded too. That first dinner was surprisingly comfortable. We went around the table sharing why we were there. Every single woman mentioned a recent divorce or the death of a spouse. Every single woman mentioned struggling to move forward. Every single woman looked relieved to be in a room with people who understood. I shared too, kept it vague. Recent divorce, trouble sleeping, looking for peace. Vivian listened to each of us with complete attention, never interrupting, never judging, just listening. It was textbook active listening. I taught this technique to my students. But watching her do it, I could see why it worked. She made you feel like you were the only person in the room. After dinner, we had our first group session. We sat in a circle in what Vivian called the healing room. Floor cushions, soft lighting, the smell of lavender in the air. Vivian led us through a guided meditation. Her voice was hypnotic, soothing. She told us to visualize our pain as something physical, something we could hold, something we could release. I felt myself relaxing, actually relaxing, for the first time in months. When the session ended, I went back to my room and slept for 6 hours straight. No pills, no waking up at 3 a.m, just sleep. I woke up thinking maybe this would actually work. That was day 1. Days 2 and 3 followed the same pattern. Yoga at sunrise, breakfast with the group, Therapy sessions where Vivian guided us through exercises designed to process trauma and build new coping mechanisms. Everything she did was based on legitimate therapeutic techniques: cognitive behavioral therapy, narrative therapy, mindfulness practices. I recognized all of it from my training. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite name, an intensity to the process, a pushing that felt like it went just slightly beyond normal therapeutic boundaries. During group sessions, Vivian would encourage us to share deeply personal information, not just about our relationships, but about our finances, our families, our fears about the future. On day 3, Patricia talked about inheriting $2 million from her late husband's life insurance. She cried while talking about it, said the money felt like blood money, said she didn't deserve it. Vivian held her hand and told her the money was a gift, a resource she could use to build her new life. Jade shared that she'd sold her tech startup for $12 million right before her divorce, said her ex-husband tried to take half even though he'd had nothing to do with the company, said she won in court but lost her faith in relationships. One by one, the women shared their stories, and every single story involved significant wealth. I noticed that, made a mental note of it. On day 4, things shifted. Vivian introduced a new exercise. She called it releasing the old self. We each had to write a letter to the version of ourselves we'd been before our trauma, before our divorces, before our losses. Then we had to read those letters out loud. Then we had to burn them. We stood in the garden at sunset, each holding our letters over a small fire pit. One by one, we read and burned. When it was my turn, I read about the Emily who'd believed marriage meant forever, who'd thought she understood human psychology well enough to prevent her own relationship from failing, who'd been naive enough to think credentials and intelligence could protect her from pain. I burned that letter, and I felt something shift inside me, something that felt like relief, like letting go. That night, Vivian talked about investment, not financial investment, emotional investment. She said healing required investing in yourself, prioritizing yourself, putting resources toward your own growth. What would you invest in yourself, she asked. If money weren't an object, what would you do to ensure you never felt this broken again? The answers varied. Therapy, travel, education, starting over in a new place. Patricia said she'd invest in learning to trust again. Vivian smiled. Trust is exactly what we're building here. Trust in yourselves. Trust in the process. Trust in the possibility of transformation. I believed her. I really did. That was my second mistake. Day 5 was when I started to get suspicious. We had a morning session where Vivian talked about legacy, about what we wanted to leave behind, about how money was just energy and energy should flow toward healing and growth. She mentioned casually that she ran a foundation, the Empowerment Initiative. It funded therapy programs for women who couldn't afford quality mental health care. Everything I make from these retreats goes directly into the foundation, she said, helping women like you, women who've been through trauma, women who need healing but lack resources. It sounded noble, altruistic, but something about the way she said it made my internal alarm start ringing. It was too perfect, too conveniently aligned with the stories we'd all been sharing about our financial situations. I started watching more carefully after that. During afternoon free time, I noticed Patricia and Vivian talking privately in the garden. They sat close together. Patricia was crying. Vivian was holding her hand. At dinner, Patricia announced that she'd decided to make a donation to Vivian's foundation, $50,000. Everyone clapped. Vivian looked touched. She hugged Patricia and thanked her for her generosity and commitment to helping other women. I didn't clap. I watched. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anxiety, because my brain was working, analyzing, connecting dots. 10 women, all recently divorced or widowed, all with significant financial resources, all vulnerable, all in an isolated location with no contact with the outside world, all being guided through intensive emotional work designed to break down defenses and build trust, and all being encouraged to think about investment, legacy, using their resources to support healing. I'd seen this pattern before, not in person, but in case studies, in research papers, in documentaries about charismatic leaders who use psychological manipulation to exploit vulnerable people. It couldn't be that, could it? I got out of bed at 2 a.m, put on a robe, walked quietly through the halls of the mansion. I told myself I was just exploring, just restless. But I knew where I was going. Vivian's office. I found it on the second floor. The door was closed but not locked. I hesitated for just a moment. Then I went inside. The office was neat, organized, professional. Degrees on the wall, medical license, certifications in various therapeutic modalities. I turned on the desk lamp, started looking through papers, and that's when I found the files. Manila folders, one for each woman at the retreat, names on the tabs. I opened Patricia's file first. Inside was everything: bank statements, tax returns, asset lists, properties owned, investment portfolios, net worth calculated down to the dollar, $2.3 million. There were notes too, in Vivian's handwriting. Guilt about inheritance. Wants to make amends. Suggested donation amount $100,000 to $200,000. I felt my stomach drop. I opened Jade's file. Same thing. Financial records. Net worth. Notes about vulnerabilities and suggested donation amounts. I opened every file. Every single woman had been researched, profiled, assessed not for their therapeutic needs, but for their financial capacity to give. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my hidden phone and photographed every page. Then I found my own file. Emily Carter, psychologist, recent divorce, settlement $300,000, current assets $420,000, including home equity. Notes: high skepticism risk. Professional training may make manipulation difficult. Recommend building trust through intellectual validation. Suggested donation $50,000. I read that twice. Manipulation. The word was right there, in black and white. Vivian knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't therapy, it was a con. A sophisticated, psychologically brutal, con targeting vulnerable, wealthy women. I closed the files, put everything back exactly as I'd found it, turned off the lamp, left the office. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and tried to process what I'd discovered. I needed to leave, immediately, take my evidence and go to the police. But it was 2:30 in the morning, and something told me that trying to leave in the middle of the night would be complicated. I decided to wait until morning, act normal, then make an excuse and leave. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. At breakfast, I told Vivian I needed to leave, said there was a family emergency. My voice was steady. My face was calm. Years of professional training helped me lie convincingly. Vivian looked concerned. Of course. I'm so sorry. What happened? My mother, I said. She's in the hospital. I need to go. Absolutely. Let me have Maya get your car keys. I waited, drank coffee, tried to look worried about a fictional medical emergency instead of terrified about what I'd discovered. Maya came back 15 minutes later. I'm so sorry, Emily. Your car won't start. I called our mechanic. He's on his way. Should be here in a few hours. My heart started pounding. I'll call a taxi. We're pretty remote out here, Maya said. But I can try. Cell service is spotty. She tried, or pretended to try, kept saying the call wouldn't go through. I felt the walls closing in. Vivian touched my arm gently. Why don't you stay for morning session while we wait for the mechanic? It might help calm your nerves. I wanted to refuse, wanted to walk out the front door and start hiking to the nearest town. But the other women were watching, waiting, and something about the way Vivian was looking at me made me think that showing panic would make things worse. I agreed. The morning session was about resistance, about how fear makes us sabotage our own healing, about how the mind creates obstacles to avoid transformation. Vivian looked directly at me several times while talking. She knew. Somehow she knew I'd been in her office, or at least suspected. When the session ended, I tried my car again. Still wouldn't start. I went back to my room and texted my friend Sarah from my hidden phone. Told her where I was. Told her if she didn't hear from me by tomorrow to call the police. The message wouldn't send. No signal. I checked the phone. Full bars last night. 0 now. They were jamming the signal somehow. I was trapped. That afternoon, Vivian asked to speak with me privately. We sat in her office, the same office where I'd found the files. Emily, she said gently, I sense you're struggling with the work we're doing here. I kept my face neutral. I'm just worried about my mother. Are you? She tilted her head. Because Maya tells me you seemed perfectly fine until this morning. No messages on your phone about any emergency. No missed calls. I said nothing. I think, Vivian continued, you're experiencing what we call transformation resistance. It's common among highly educated women. You're used to being in control, being the helper, not the helped. And so when real healing starts to happen, your ego creates emergencies to avoid the discomfort of change. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. She was using my own professional knowledge against me, pathologizing my very real suspicion as psychological resistance. I found your files, I said quietly. She didn't blink. The financial profiles, the manipulation notes. I know what you're doing. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not warm, cold. And what exactly do you think I'm doing, Emily? Running a con, targeting vulnerable women, using therapy as a weapon to extract money. That's one interpretation, she said. Here's another. I run legitimate wellness retreats that genuinely help women heal. And yes, some of those women choose to donate to my foundation because they believe in the work, because they want to help others the way they've been helped. Patricia donated $50,000 after 5 days. That's not charity. That's manipulation. Patricia is a grown woman who made a choice about how to use her own money. Vivian leaned forward. But let's say you're right. Let's say I am manipulating these women. What are you going to do about it? Leave. Report you. With what evidence? Photos on a phone you smuggled in after agreeing to our no-phone policy? Photos you took by breaking into my private office. That's not evidence, Emily. That's trespassing and invasion of privacy. I felt my jaw clench. But here's the real question, Vivian continued. Even if you report me, even if you tell these women what you think I'm doing, do you think they'll believe you? You've been here 5 days. I've been building trust with them all week. Patricia jaded the others. They trust me. They've opened up to me. They've experienced real emotional breakthroughs. And you want to tell them it was all fake? That they were fooled? She was right. I knew she was right. The psychological principle of commitment and consistency. Once people publicly commit to something, they defend it, even when confronted with contradictory evidence. Most people would rather be conned than admit they were conned, Vivian said. The shame of being fooled is worse than the cost of staying fooled. So go ahead, tell them, see what happens. I stood up. You're a monster. I'm a businesswoman, she corrected. And you're free to leave whenever your car is fixed. Should be any minute now. It was 3 more hours before Maya came to tell me the car was ready. I didn't tell the other women, not then, because I was afraid Vivian was right. Afraid they wouldn't believe me. Afraid they'd see me as the problem. I got in my car and drove away. And for 2 days, I tried to convince myself it was over. I was out. I was safe. What happened to the other women wasn't my responsibility. But I couldn't sleep. Again, for different reasons this time. On day 8, I got a phone call from an unknown number. It was Mara, the youngest woman at the retreat, 28 years old, recently divorced from a tech executive. Quiet. Seemed the most fragile of the group. Dr. Carter. Her voice was shaking. I need your help. What happened? My grandmother died 3 days ago. My mother called the retreat, left a message, but Dr. Cross never told me. She said the call never came, said I was manifesting loss to avoid growth. But I overheard one of the staff talking about it. She lied to me. She kept me here when I should have been with my family. Everything clicked into place. Mara, where are you? Still at the retreat. But something's wrong. Dr. Cross is planning this ceremony tomorrow. She's calling it the commitment ceremony. We're all supposed to sign something. Make pledges to our new selves. But Patricia told me she's signing over $200,000. Jade is doing $300,000. Everyone's giving money, Dr. Carter. A lot of money. Can you leave? I tried. My car won't start either. None of the cars will start. And we can't get cell signal except for this one spot near the edge of the property. I was already grabbing my keys. Stay somewhere public. Don't be alone. I'm coming back. I drove 3 hours in the dark. Called the police on the way. Told them everything. They said they'd send someone, but it might take a while. Remote location. Limited units available. I couldn't wait. I arrived at the estate at midnight. The gates were closed. I parked on the road and climbed over. The mansion was mostly dark. One light on downstairs. I found Mara waiting by the pool. She ran to me when she saw me, hugged me tight. "What do we do?" she whispered. "We wake everyone up. We tell them the truth, together." We went room to room, woke up each woman, brought them all to the living room. They looked confused, annoyed. Patricia asked what was going on, said we should wait until morning. That's when Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs. "Ladies," she said calmly, "why don't we all go back to bed and discuss this in the morning when we're thinking clearly?" "No," I said. "We're discussing this now." I told them everything. The files, the financial profiling, the manipulation notes, Mara's grandmother, the lies. Vivian stood there and let me talk. Didn't interrupt. Just waited. When I finished, she turned to the other women. "Emily is experiencing a very common psychological phenomenon: projection. She came here looking for healing but can't accept help, so she's projecting her own distrust and paranoia onto me. Seeing conspiracy where there's only care." Patricia nodded slowly. "That does make sense." "No," Mara said. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it. "It doesn't. Because my grandmother really did die, and Dr. Cross really did lie about the phone call. I checked. I called my mother. The call came 3 days ago, to this number, and someone took a message, but I was never told." The room went very quiet. Jade spoke up. "Is that true?" Vivian's expression didn't change. "I don't know what Mara's talking about. We never received any call." "Yes, you did," Mara said. "I heard Maya talking about it. She said you told her to tell my family I was in session and couldn't be disturbed." The cracks were showing now. I pulled out my phone. "I have photos of your files, financial profiles on every woman here, notes about how much you think you can get from each of us." "You broke into my office," Vivian said coldly. "You violated privacy laws. Whatever you think, those photos prove they're illegally obtained." Maybe I said, but they prove intent. They prove this was never about therapy. It was about money. Patricia stood up. "I want to see the photos." I showed her, showed everyone. Watching their faces was heartbreaking. Confusion, denial, then slowly, painfully recognition. "You said the donations were optional," Jade said quietly. "You said the foundation work was separate from the therapy." "It is," Vivian said, but her voice was different now. Harder. The warmth was gone. "But you all made choices, adult choices, about how to spend your money. I never forced anyone." "You manipulated us," Patricia said. "You made us trust you, made us believe you cared, and the whole time you were calculating how much you could take." Vivian laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Of course I was. You're all wealthy women who came to me desperate for help. Did you really think I'd provide that service for free? This is my business. You paid for access to my expertise. Some of you chose to invest more. That was your choice. You lied about my grandmother," Mara said. "You kept me here when I should have been with my family. I made a judgment call about what was best for your healing process." "That wasn't your call to make," I said. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, angry, hurt, betrayed. Vivian held up her hands. "Fine. You've figured it out. You're all so clever. So what happens now? You report me, sue me. Do you know how that will look? All of you will have to admit publicly that you were conned by a wellness guru, that you fell for the most obvious manipulation in the book. Rich women giving money to a charismatic leader who promised healing. Do you want that story in the news? Do you want your families, your colleagues, your communities, knowing how easily you were fooled?" Silence. She was right. The shame would be enormous, public, permanent. But then Patricia spoke. Her voice was shaking, but clear. "I gave you $300,000. The number landed like a bomb. 300,000, Patricia repeated. "That was supposed to go to my daughter's college fund, to her future. And I gave it to you because you made me believe it was the right thing to do, that it was investing in myself, in healing." Tears were streaming down her face. "So yes, I'll look foolish. I'll look like an idiot, but I'll also look like someone who was preyed upon by a professional manipulator. And maybe my shame will stop another woman from making the same mistake." One by one, the other women spoke up. 200,000. 150,000. 500,000. The amounts they'd committed or already transferred. Vivian's expression finally changed. Uncertainty flickered across her face. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Say it again," I said. "All of you. State your names and how much you gave. For the record." They did? Then I looked at Vivian. "You were wrong about one thing. People aren't always more ashamed of being conned than angry about being fooled. Sometimes shame turns into fury, and fury turns into action." I called the police again, told them we had multiple women willing to file complaints. This time, they took it seriously. Officers arrived 90 minutes later. Dawn was breaking. They interviewed each woman separately, collected evidence, searched Vivian's office, and found even more files. Previous retreats, previous victims. Over $2 million collected in 3 years. Some women from earlier retreats had suspected, but just like Vivian predicted, they'd stayed silent, too ashamed to admit they'd been fooled. But not anymore. We filed charges as a group: fraud, theft by deception, unlawful imprisonment for the car sabotage and signal jamming. The trial took 8 months. During that time, I testified. So did the other women. So did victims from previous retreats who finally felt safe enough to come forward. Vivian's defense argued that the donations were voluntary, that the therapy was real, that any manipulation was just good sales technique. But the notes in those files undermined everything. They showed premeditation, intent, a systematic plan to exploit vulnerable women. The jury convicted her on 12 counts. She's serving 10 years. That was 6 months ago. I still talk to some of the women from the retreat. We formed our own support group. Real support. No hidden agendas. Just women processing trauma together. Mara and I meet for coffee once a month. She's in therapy now. Real therapy. With a licensed professional who doesn't ask about her bank account. Patricia got most of her money back through civil suits. She set up a college fund for her daughter. And then she set up a scholarship fund for other women recovering from financial abuse. Jade started a foundation of her own, one that actually helps women, with transparency and oversight, and no charismatic leaders promising miracles. As for me, I sleep better now. Not because the pain of my divorce is gone. It's not. Healing doesn't work that way. But I'm not afraid of the pain anymore. I've learned that being vulnerable doesn't mean being weak, that asking for help doesn't make you foolish, that falling apart and putting yourself back together is just part of being human. I've also learned that my professional skills aren't separate from my personal life. They're tools I can use to protect myself and others even when I'm the one hurting. I went back to my practice with new perspective. I talk more openly with my patients now about the complexity of healing, about how it's not linear, not simple, not something you can buy for $10,000 in 10 days. Real healing takes time, takes work, takes honest support from people who care about your well-being, not your wallet. People ask me if I regret going to the retreat, if I regret spending $10,000 to almost get scammed. I tell them no. I paid for a wellness retreat and got a different kind of education instead. I learned that the strongest thing you can do isn't heal alone. It's heal together. And sometimes the most therapeutic thing you can say is just 2 words. Me too. I learned that shame only has power when you're alone with it. But when you share it, when you speak it out loud in a room full of people who understand, it transforms into connection, into solidarity, into strength. Vivian thought she understood psychology. She'd studied it, practiced it, used it as a weapon. But she missed the most important lesson. People are stronger than their shame, always. And when you try to exploit that shame, when you use people's pain against them, eventually they'll find each other. They'll compare notes. They'll realize they weren't alone. And that's when your whole operation falls apart. I still have that box of tampons with my hidden phone. I keep it on my dresser as a reminder. Trust your instincts, even when everyone else thinks you're being paranoid. Even when it would be easier to just go along. Sometimes paranoia is just pattern recognition. And sometimes the most healing thing you can do is refuse to be healed by someone who's trying to break you. I'm doing okay now. Better than okay, actually. I have a therapist. A real one. We work through my trust issues and my tendency to isolate and my belief that I should be able to fix myself. She doesn't promise transformation. She promises to sit with me while I do the hard work of transformation myself. That's the difference. Real healing doesn't happen to you. It happens with you, in collaboration with someone who sees your humanity, not your bank account. Vivian saw us all as marks, as targets, as broken things she could profit from. But we weren't broken. We were cracked open, which is different. Being cracked open means light can get in, means growth can happen, means you can rebuild yourself differently than you were before. It's painful, it's slow, it's messy, but it's real. And real, I've learned, is worth more than any promise of quick fixes or miraculous transformations. I still live in my Victorian house with Poe, still practice therapy, still struggle sometimes with sleep and trust and believing I deserve peace. But I'm healing, actually healing, not because someone fixed me, but because I'm learning to fix myself with help, with support, with honesty. And that's the only kind of healing that lasts. So if you're listening to this and thinking about wellness retreats or quick fixes or charismatic leaders who promise to transform you in 10 days, let me save you $10,000 and a lot of heartbreak. Healing is slow. It's individual. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice, breath by breath. There's no shortcut. There's no guru with all the answers. There's only you doing the work with people who genuinely care about you. That's the truth Vivian never wanted us to know. Because if we knew that we wouldn't need her, and we definitely wouldn't pay her. I'm Emily Carter. I'm a psychologist. I'm divorced. I'm healing. And I'm okay with all of that. Finally,